here, Zainab.
Am I totally like boring them?
No, it's really interesting. I'm listening myself. It's very good.
Perfect. And should we start?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. We're almost done, okay, girls? So don't worry. We're starting from the deforestation. It's the last paragraph on that page. Got it? It's the last paragraph on page 5. On page 5. Okay. Do you guys have any questions?
No.
Okay. The deforestation of the island was not only the death knell. Death knell is like the death bell. Death knell for the elaborate social and ceremonial life. It also had other drastic effects on everyday life for the population generally. From 1500, the shortage of trees was forcing many people to abandon building houses from timber and live in caves. They ran out of wood. They had to go live in caves. And when the wood eventually ran out altogether, about a century later, everyone had to use the only materials left. They resorted to stone shelters dug into the hillsides or flimsy reed huts cut from the vegetation that grew around the edges of the crater lakes. Canoes could no longer be built, and only reed boats, incapable of long voyages, could be made. Fishing was also more difficult because nets had previously been made from the paper mulberry tree, which could also be made into cloth, and that was no longer available. Removal of the tree cover also had badly affected the soil of the island, which would have already suffered from a lack of suitable animal manure to replace nutrients taken up by the crops. Now remember, there weren't any mammals there, and you need some mammals and other animals in the land so that they fertilize. I'm sure you've seen the cow manure and stuff like that. It fertilizes the land, so you don't have a natural source of fertilization. So already the soil is weak. But imagine once they cut down the trees, if it rains or if wind comes, it just knocks off that really fertile layer of rich soil on top, and you never get that back. Increased exposure caused soil erosion and the leaching out of essential nutrients. As a result, crop yields declined. So now that easy sweet potato and chicken and the sweet potatoes that we're eating, they weren't as nutritious and they weren't doing as well. The only source of food on the island unaffected by these problems was the chickens. As they became ever more important, they had to be protected from theft, and the introduction of stone-built defense chicken houses can be dated to this phase of the island's history. It became impossible to support 7,000 people on this diminishing resource base, and numbers fell rapidly. After 1600, Easter Island went into decline and regressed, that means went back in time, to ever more primitive conditions. Without trees, and so without canoes, the islanders were trapped in their remote home, unable to escape the consequences of their self-inflicted environmental collapse. The social and cultural impact of deforestation was equally important. So socially, in the way they related with one another, and culturally, the ceremonies, the things that were important to them in their beliefs and things like that, was just as important. The inability to erect any more statues must have had a devastating effect on the belief system and social organization, and called into question the foundations on which that complex society had been built. If they spent all their life, socially they were organized around this, culturally, religiously, they're organized around these stone statues, and now they can't build them anymore, what does that say about their beliefs? What does that say about who they were and what they lived their life by? There were increasing conflicts over diminishing resources, and now, remember, food is getting scarcer and scarcer, so then it creates conflict over the diminishing resources, resulting in a state of almost permanent warfare. So almost always they were engaged in fighting wars. Slavery became common, and as the amount of protein available fell, protein is a certain kind of food like meat and nuts and things like that, things that have a lot of nutrition and things that can really sustain you and keep you going. As the amount of foods that were available that had a lot of protein fell, the population turned to cannibalism. That's why they started eating each other. One of the main aims of warfare was to destroy the ahu, those flat cement plains of opposing clans. A few survived as burial places, but most were abandoned. The magnificent stone statues, too massive to destroy, were pulled down. The first Europeans found only a few still standing when they arrived in the 18th century, and all had been toppled by the 1830s. When they were asked by the visitors how the statues had been moved from the quarry, the primitive islanders could no longer remember what their ancestors had achieved, and could only say that the huge figures had walked across the island. The Europeans, seeing a treeless landscape, could think of no logical explanation either, and were equally mystified. So no one could tell what happened. How did these people end up getting to this point? Against great odds, the islanders painstakingly constructed over many centuries one of the most advanced societies of its type in the world. For 1,000 years, they sustained a way of life in accordance with an elaborate set of social, religious customs that enabled them not only to survive but to flourish. It was in many ways a triumph, a victory of human ingenuity. Human ingenuity means genius, basically, and an apparent victory over a difficult environment. But in the end, increasing numbers of cultural ambitions of the islanders proved too great for the limited resources available to them. When the environment was ruined by the pressure, the society very quickly collapsed with it, leading to a state of near barbarism. The Easter Islanders, aware that they were almost completely isolated from the rest of the world, must surely have realized that their very existence depended on the limited resources of a small island. After all, it was small enough for them to walk around the entire island in a day or so and see for themselves what was happening to the forest. Yet they were unable to devise a system that allowed them to find the right balance with their environment. Instead, vital resources were steadily consumed until finally none were left. Indeed, at the very time when the limitations of the island must have become starkly apparent, the competition between the clans for the available timber seems to have intensified as more and more statues were carved and moved across the island in an attempt to secure prestige and status. The fact that so many were left unfinished or stranded near the quarry suggests that no account was taken of how few trees were left on the island. The fate of Easter Island has wider implications too. Implication means lesson. On Easter Island, the Earth has only limited resources to support human society and all its demands. Like the islanders, the human population of the Earth has no practical means of escape. We cannot go to another planet. How has the environment of the world shaped human history, and how have people shaped and altered the world in which they live? Have other societies fallen into the same trap as the islanders? For the last 2 million years, humans have succeeded in obtaining more food and extracting more resources on which to sustain increasing numbers of people and increasingly complex and technologically advanced societies. But have they been any more successful than the islanders in finding a way of life that does not, I can't read that word, that cannot fatally deplete the resources that are available to them and irreversibly damage their life support system? Okay. So that is the story of the Easter Islanders, and he ends with really a good question, and that's exactly what I want to explore today. But real quick, do you guys understand the story very well? Do you understand who they are, what happened to them? Do you understand that completely?
Yeah.
Do you guys have any questions about the story?
No.
Halima? Okay. So basically the story is one of a society that starts off that is able to flourish. And from nothing that they do from themselves, it really is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that makes it easy for them to live on that island in a place where it seems like it seemingly should not be so easy. After that happens, what do? They're given this ability. They're given this ability to come and live on this land that really is not very possible for them to live on it. And they not only live on it, but they live on it with great ease. And it's not from themselves. Again, keep in mind, this is not from themselves. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's test and gift to them. So what are they going to do with this? And we look to see what are they going to do with this. We know that their obligation is what all Muslims' obligation is upon us, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to enjoin what's good, to forbid what's evil, to worship Him and worship Him alone. That's what they're called on to do. And they're called on to enjoy all the good things of the world, but they're just never supposed to overstep their bounds. But what do they end up doing? They end up competing with each other in construction of statues. And in order to continue this culture of disbelief, they have to degrade their environment. They destroy it. And then what ends up happening? They regress into cannibalism and perpetual warfare. They get locked inside. They end up living in caves, and they lose all the stuff that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given them. They lose the ease. They lose the food, and instead it gets replaced with this system that they can't last. And so the lesson here is that I want you guys to take from it is that history is really, when we look at history, the reason why this author is calling this question, this story into account, and he continues this all throughout his book. He uses different examples of different places and different people to show you that history is really all a description and explanation of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala interacts with human beings. He gives them things, he gives them tests, either of goodness or of hardship. And then he sees what those societies are